Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Krypton. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we had that opening where we have Sag and Lyta getting together, and it's like, oh, let's run away together. And they're kind of doing it and everything. I'm like, oh, man, that's so sweet. I was like, oh, this must be like a past memory, like from before or something like that. And then it's like, yeah, they're going to go back to Kandor afterwards. But it's like, she's like, oh, here he gets his family, sigil back, and his name back as an L, and it's like, oh, your mom was okay with us binding. I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, whoa, are we doing... They like said go back in time and he's changing everything or something like that. I thought that might have been like where that was heading. That ends up obviously heading in a different direction, but we'll get to that soon. Well, hell, what beat around the bush? Let's get straight to it. I'm curious to know most people's reaction, because a lot of people are like, whoa, I can't believe they actually had the stones to kill Lyta. Now it's like, well, they're somewhat running it back. I mean, I guess technically, I thought, once again, I guess this proves that there won't, because I kept thinking like, oh, it's going to be like a time travel thing. I was like, no, apparently not. It's just going to be a thing of like, apparently the Lyta that we saw and got to see this season wasn't a real Lyta. It was a clone, which I shouldn't be too surprised by, because it's like, it's interesting too, because it's like, you thought that whole Nissa storyline was done, but it's like, obviously it's not, because it kind of gets implemented in this case. So I just think that in itself is kind of fascinating. But basically, she was hooked up to this creature known as a mercy, and basically it traps you in a fantasy. Now, many interesting things about that, really quickly, is to break down the whole thing of like, obviously she's been hooked up to this thing for months. Probably when we saw Lyta and like Dev at the end of season 1, after the month or so time skip, like that's probably the last time the real Lyta was kind of up and about. Because essentially it seems like, basically he tries to justify it by being like, oh, my mom, she was so consumed by sadness because of what happened, losing her mom and losing Sag. So I did this almost out of mercy, but it's like, which I'm like, holy crap. I was like, well, I guess that kind of makes sense why you were so willing to recondition her, because it wasn't your real mother. It was a clone, which speaks volumes. He couldn't recondition his real mother, he just couldn't bring himself to do it. A clone, that's why he was so willing and allowed it to happen. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Because he does all this stuff claiming he loves his mother and all that. But it's like, yeah, you recondition her to kind of force her to kind of be who you want her to be. So that in itself is interesting. But then it's kind of like interesting too, because now we know it's a clone. He admits like, yeah, I was actually kind of surprised. Even though I knew it wasn't my real mother, it still broke my heart to see her die, because whether or not it's still kind of your mom, so of course it affects you that way. But what I love is even Zod can't for a moment tell the truth, because it's because in his twisted mind it's like, I guess because Lyta didn't agree with everything that he did. Because obviously we ended up finding out, I didn't realize that, Doomsday was the end all be all. That from the very beginning, Doomsday's always been his plan, essentially to conquer the universe. So I didn't realize that, and that's why Lyta had to be put down to a certain extent, because she stood against him. It's like, no, we can find another way. But in his mind, it's like, father's words, he made you weep. But she's like, no, the fact of the matter is, Sag kind of, because essentially she wanted to make up for all that she'd done. She thought she killed her mother and Sag was gone forever. So it's like, what I'm going to do, I'm going to honor them by making up for the mistakes that I've made. She was trying to do the right thing. But the thing is, like I said, Zod had the audacity to lie, to be like, oh, she was so broken up about my father. But the fact is, you're lying to one of your subordinates. You couldn't tell her straight up that she didn't agree with your plan. So you do what you always do. You make people submit to you. And it's like, and because I think at the very least he thought like, okay, I'll put you in this fantasy. When it's all said and done, my plans will go through. Once you wake up, then you'll see the validity of it and everything. And it's just like, wow, that kind of just shows you how far he's willing to go. Also, the fact is that he's lied to everyone. Because even later on when Sag confronts him, he never breaks that, oh, your mom's still, Lyta's still alive. Because I guess for him it's like, because you're not on my side. If you were on my side, I'd probably tell you the truth. But because we're adversaries, the fact of the matter is, mom's already going to think you're gone, when this is all said and done. So I think I'll kill you. My thought was kind of like, he'll kill Sag, and when it's all said and done, it's like, oh yeah, when his mom it's time to wake her up, it's like, oh yeah, she already lost Sag anyway, so I just won't tell her that he actually came back, and I had to kill him to get him out of the way. Potentially, or maybe he'd handle it some other way. I assume he'd probably end up killing his parents. I mean, to be fair, seeing the way he handled Lyta makes you think maybe, I don't know. Seg is the most against him, but to be fair, Lyta is too. So I don't know. It's just a complicated thing. I'm curious, like, would he actually kill his father in the end if the time came? It's kind of hard to say, you know? I should also point out something too, like basically the mercy is something that apparently he had come across in his travels in the future. So I'm wondering, is he talking, because at first when he was like, oh, there's a plant that can, deal with like pleasure sensors, I immediately was like, poison ivy? Like I thought it was something poison ivy related, but I think the mercy is something Krypton related. It's just probably something he discovered, before Krypton exploded in his time, So I'm assuming that, but it would have been nice to be like, oh my God, did he get something from poison ivy? I was like, because he talked about his journeys and stuff like that, which we know he's been to Earth, but I don't know if this is a Zod that's, well, no, because he's met Clark, he's met Superman, so they've definitely crossed paths. So that in itself is interesting, but I just thought that was kind of fascinating, because I was about to say too, I was like, have they ever crossed paths? And it, like, because like a lot of DC villains obviously have crossed paths, they've teamed up and stuff like that, but I'm curious, like, had Zod and Poison Ivy ever joined up? I mean, because most mediums keep a lot of, villains like associated with their specific hero, like, so Poison Ivy being a Batman villain, I mean, doesn't mean Superman's never crossed paths with, but it's kind of crazy to think, has Zod ever crossed paths with Poison Ivy in the comic books? I'd actually need to look into that, because I think that'd be kind of interesting. It just seems like such an odd pairing, but we'll see. But that's where my mind initially went, but like I said, I think it is just kind of like a Krypton thing, but essentially to use the mercy to kind of trap Doomsday in a fake reality so that basically he can command him. And it's interesting, like I said, I'm curious to know how most people feel about that, or, like I said, because it's like, oh, everyone's kind of, oh, they actually did, oh, they didn't, they kind of ran it back. I'm fine with it. I just thought it was kind of interesting. It's like, holy crap, so we'll see kind of where everything kind of goes going forward with all that, but there is a lot to digest in this episode too, kind of along with the whole situation. And kind of getting into the fantasy she had. It was actually kind of sweet. Like, oh, this is a life she would have led, everyone there. But like the more they drained from the mercy, the more the fantasy started to crumble. And basically her real memory started like flowing in and kind of corrupting the fantasy. And knowing that it was a fantasy, not knowing at that time that her mom and Seg were back, like she had to destroy the fantasy because she needed to get away, because Krypton needed her. Essentially, the universe needed her to help stop Zod, which that all coincides with, Seg, Nyssa, Jaina, and Dev trying to stop him. Because, obviously, Nyssa and Seg are still dealing with the whole Brainiac took our child, and they're searching every quadrant or at least place in space that their satellites essentially can reach, that they're aware of, but they find no hide nor hair of Brainiac. So, but it's like they're not giving up, but it's like they're gonna have to go to Val, but they can't get in touch with Val because he would know kind of how to help with the situation. It's actually interesting too, because Seg learned about what Val did on Wagthor, because it's like, oh, like he's still with Jack Zor. It's like, yeah, but like my grandfather isn't complicit in all this. It's like, oh yeah, the reason I haven't been able to contact him is because he ended up killing 100 innocent people to destroy the elevator or whatever. And so it's like, oh wait, Nyssa initially goes like, she kind of understands. She's like, well, we've all done, that Val is a good person, and the fact of the matter is we've all done things we're not proud of in this war. Which I think that's still going to be a hard thing for even Seg to know. It's like, wait, his grandfather being idealistic as he is, for him to cross that line. And that's the thing. I mean, that's the sad truth of war. And I think maybe that's something that it's going to be potentially implemented into Seg from now on. That the fact is, maybe there are certain lines you have to cross if it's kind of for the greater good. I don't know. It's kind of interesting because, like, I feel like that's not like something, his grandson would, Clark would ever really be okay with that type of thing. So maybe it would be something that Seg himself is like, no, like, I mean, to be fair, Clark's ideals are more so the Kent's ideals kind of passed down to him. Also, depending on the continuity you want to go with of just how they raise him. But traditionally, how they typically raise him, those are more their ideals. It's nurture versus nature situation. But I'm curious to see who Seg is, who Val is, who they are as L's at the end of all of this, when it's all said and done. Kind of circling back to it, I'm assuming that the memories that I'm blanking. Doomsday would most likely be stuff about him as Dax and just the whole aspect of like having that life that he had, before becoming Doomsday and everything. It's actually kind of interesting because they make a point to be like, oh, that Mercy has an extremely powerful half-life to the point it will kind of basically keep you under forever, which I think is very foreshadowing. That might be what they end up doing to Zod. They might like trap him in that and stuff like that. Also, I should also know, I thought it was kind of a fascinating thing. Like, I was wondering, I was like, oh, so it's like now that Light is still alive, that means the future that Seg saw of him potentially killing her could actually happen. But it's like, no. That future that Seg saw was technically the future, because the Phantom Zone exists out of time and space. So what he saw was something that had already happened a couple months ago. But for him in that moment, he probably saw it when it was happening, but then it was like time kept going or whatever. But it's so fascinating. The moment like she's choking that Zod is choking her, and then he looks back, because that's interesting because he actually heard Seg's voice. I mean, to be fair, I guess like Seg was able to kind of like punch through time and space, and then like he heard it for a moment. I don't think he was ever going to kill his mom. I think it was just going to be enough to kind of like make her pass out. But still, I wonder, did Seg calling out like that stop that? Maybe he thought it was his conscience or something, potentially. I don't know. Like I said, kind of going just to the hypocrisy of just like, the fact is he had, once again, having to make her submit. He is like, oh, I didn't want to have to do this. He literally fights and beats her up. I guess you could make the argument that's kind of the Zod way of making you submit, no mercy. Which I guess that's the irony behind it, that he's trying to show his mom's mercy, the creatures known as mercy, and that's a big thing for the Zod family. We don't show mercy, so I guess that's just like supposed to be the irony behind that whole situation. I didn't even think about that till just now. So, what I thought was interesting was the moment in the cell that Nyssa and Seg had. I immediately was thinking, like, when he was like, the fact of the matter is, I'm by your side through all of this, every step of the way. The moment he said it, I was like, are you two about to make out and then Lyta's going to come save you and then she's going to see this and it's going to complicate things? Kind of happened in reverse, where it's like, oh, he says that Dev comes to save them. They meet up with Lyta and Jaina, and they, Seg and Lyta start making out. And you see Nyssa kind of affected, because I think for her it's a situation of like, for one, I think she has feelings for Seg. She kind of always has, like, especially when it's like the way he saw her, like no one else did. So I think there's that, but at the same time, I think it's also like, now that he has Lyta again, he's probably not going to be as focused on saving our son. Maybe it'll be a combination of the two. I don't know. You actually kind of feel bad because it's a very complicated situation, because it's like, yeah, obviously it's like, oh, I know Lyta's someone you love, but maybe on some shape or form she thought, sadly with Lyta gone, maybe they could have, like, she wasn't really thinking that, but I think maybe there was some part of her that might have thought like, hey, it's like, we've got our son to, go find and look after, so, but I think she probably feels like with Lyta back, maybe he'll kind of forget all about that, but I think not, like, that's not who Seg is, but I think maybe that might be a worry of Nyssa's. Maybe, I don't know. I just thought that was kind of like I was like, this is going to turn into a very complicated situation, because it's like, especially too, because you also have like the other end of things too. You have Dev there being like, you see he's happy for them. It's still complicated too, because it's like, let's not forget he's in love with Lyta, and that's just a whole complicated thing, which it was still nice to kind of see him and Nyssa at the wedding. I don't know if they were supposed to be a couple in her fantasy. I guess it's kind of like, oh, Dev and Nyssa both deserve happiness. So, of course, in her fantasy, they're together. Like, it's all a big, beautiful, happy family. Everyone's together. Everyone's happy type of situation. Do notice who wasn't there, though. There was no Adam Strange there. So, I think that speaks volume. And to be fair, she doesn't really know Adam like that. She doesn't have the connection to him like she does to Seg and everything else. But still, I just thought it was kind of fascinating. So we do have, like I said, Zod is preparing to basically wipe out everyone on Wagthor, and obviously that's just going to be this first step, ending this resistance. When it's all said and done, he's got Doomsday potentially under his control now, and that thing being the unstoppable killing machine it is like, how do you fight against that? we'll ultimately have to wait and see. But there's also kind of circling back is the whole situation that Seg brought up about the whole, once again, just understanding Zod as a character. Like, the fact of the matter is, it's like, oh, you weren't willing to do anything to save Lyta, but it's like, is that because you knew it was a clone, so you were fine with I'm assuming that's it. Like, if the real mother was in that condition, that situation, would he have done it? I don't think he would have, because I think he would have looked at it as weakness. I think he had those soldiers there trying to do as a sense of like trying to save her. I don't think at the time it seemed like, oh, maybe he was trying to do both, attack the resistance as well as save Lyta, but maybe Lyta was never the focus. Maybe she always was, even though she's a clone. Maybe he was like, oh, I can still save her too, and get the, I mean, would this Lyta have replaced his mother? Like, probably not, because he still would have known, no, she's a clone, so it's not the case, or maybe, I don't know. I'm curious, like, that's why he was able to make that, why he made that choice, because he knew it wasn't a real Lyta. But I don't know. Zod is complex. In some regards, he's very, like, straightforward of, like, where he stands, but other times it seems like there is more complications that come to him when it comes to him, mainly when it comes to his family. So, I don't know. I'm very interested to see ultimately where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good